Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. Today's date is Thursday, March 27th. Is that right, John? Did I get that 27th?
That's correct. It's the day of the Franklin County Republican Central Committee Lincoln Days. That's why you remember March 27th, Brad.
Big night tonight in Washmo. That is John Combest every single day of his life for the past 23 years. I mean every single day, not just weekdays, but 7 days a week, 365 per year. He puts together this incredible list of all the stuff you should know that's going on in the state of Missouri. It's called johncombest.com. That's the website, COMBEST, johncombest.com. And all you have to do is go there. It's nothing fancy. It's sort of what version of web is this again, John?
0.0.
Yes, it's web version 0.0. And he puts together all this information, sometimes as much as 50 plus items not every single day, but a lot of days when there's lots of news. But what we do is we bring this guy in right here. Your name again, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what do you do?
Now on with a countdown.
He does a countdown. That's what he does in his life, you know. And he starts off with...
In third place,
a key follow-up from a story we discussed yesterday. We talked about the fact that Anheuser-Busch had pulled out, of PrideFest in St. Louis. Anheuser-Busch is continuing to sponsor PrideFest in other cities, but seemed to draw the line at St. Louis and said, no more. We're not going to toss any cash your way. A critical follow-up piece from none other than St. Louis Public Radio. Brian Munoz went out to some queer bars and got a little bit of feedback from those folks. Not surprisingly, there's a group called Rehab Bar and Grill. They're in the Grove neighborhood. Now, if you're not from St. Louis, I know we have a lot of folks who listen to the show who are not from St. Louis. If you go in St. Louis City and you go south, once you enter the city from most places, you go south, you'll find the Grove. And you know you're there when you see a lot of rainbow flags, transgender flags, a lot of hipster-type bars. When you see bars with rainbow flags, you can pretty well be assured that you're in the Grove. There's a place called Rehab Bar and Grill. Munoz helpfully links to their Facebook post. You'll see a big triangle with a queer rainbow on it. And they are no longer going to serve Anheuser-Busch products. No, they're going to sell through their current inventory, and then they are done. They are drawing a line in the sand, and they're going to say, if Anheuser-Busch doesn't support the queer community, then the queer community is not going to support Anheuser-Busch. Pretty nice follow-up piece by St. Louis Public Radio here, Brad.
John, you know what? I'll be honest with you. I've pulled all the Anheuser-Busch ads off the station here because of the fact that they just don't support us like they used to. Oh, hold it. We don't have any ads on the station. So
That's true. I heard a Menards ad yesterday. It's good to see you're getting a little bit of national money there, Brad.
Yeah,
I would expect that we'll see a couple stories here and there from local media about PrideFest. I imagine when PrideFest rolls around in June, there'll be some kind of hissyfit or, some kind of gay queer stunt or something. Maybe they'll bash Anheuser-Busch bottles or whatever, and then they'll forget about it. If I was a member of the LGBTQIA asterisk whatever community, I would wonder whether my people need to drown their sorrows in alcohol, whether they need to take depressants to ironically make themselves feel better, or maybe they should abstain from alcohol and keep a clear head. But I don't advise queers, Brad. I'm not paid to be in that business.
John, why is it that brings an interesting thing, and I don't know if anybody's addressed this. I think that people ask A-B about it, and they've not said anything. But why is it that they're doing it in other markets but not in St. Louis?
Here's my guess. My guess is that in some other cities, maybe they locked into a multi-year contract. So maybe the folks I'll play my twice a month Monsanto card here and say that sometimes we would enter into multi-year agreements with companies, with events where we would sign a 2 or 3 year deal, like the Cardinals, other folks like that. and you lay out a bunch of money up front, and then it's harder for you to pull out, pardon the expression, later on. So they may have a multi-year deal. And also, it's also possible, and if we don't know the internal Anheuser-Busch clergy system, I should say the InBev clergy system, it's possible that all those sponsorship decisions are made in the local market. So in other words, these decisions might not be made by InBev brass. They might be led by a country or a regional lead. So in other words, it wouldn't be a company-wide mandate. Maybe somebody in the Midwest says, okay, we're going to stay in Chicago, but we're not going to do St. Louis. We're going to stay in Seattle, but we're not going to do Portland.
Interesting, because, it is sort of weird that quote unquote their headquarters are here, but everybody knows that's not the truth anymore, that they would not be doing it here but doing in other markets. But that's probably the explanation. That's why you ask John Combest, because when it comes to corporate stuff, John's got the scoop, right, John?
Every once in a while, yeah.
Okay, on to number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Speaking of St. Louis City and traveling to a dangerous place, Missouri's Governor Mike Kehoe will be off Hampton Avenue at the St. Louis Police Officers Association headquarters today at 10 a.m. And he's going to do a ceremonial bill signing of the citizen-led commission that will now be providing oversight to the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. And people in critical circles where people don't like it, they call it state control of the police department. But folks like Mike Kehoe, folks like Jane Duker, point out that it's really a board led by citizens of the city of St. Louis. I think they should have started that message a long time ago so people stop saying state control. I'm guilty of saying state control. Let's get back to the point. I'm pulling a Brad Hildebrand and weaving there. Kehoe will be at the police headquarters today, the union headquarters, at 10 a.m. He signed the actual bill yesterday in Jefferson City, but like a good politician, he signs it with a bunch of people around, and then he can go to the location where it has the most effect and do a press event and get some attention there, invite local dignitaries who actually support the proposal to be there, and use it as an opportunity to shake some hands, kiss some hands and shake some babies and talk about what it's going to do for the state. I think that the key quote from this piece is that the governor says, well, you can't legislate lower crime, but what you can do is give law enforcement the tools that it takes. And I think that, boy, Kehoe really has to set the expectation here that we're not going to see a rapid reduction in crime just because we have state commission overseeing the police. You get what I'm saying, Brad?
Yeah. Now, is the state commission going to be able to come in and essentially hire more people? I mean, hire more police officers? Is that something they can do pretty quick?
Yeah, I think so. He noted that the bill, and this piece, by the way, is brought to us by Jack Suntrup of the Post-Dispatch. Kehoe notes that there's a requirement in the bill, and this is a larger crime bill. The part that's got the most attention is control of the police department. But Kehoe notes that there's a requirement in the bill forcing the city to boost spending on the police department. So the city is now actually required to spend more money hiring officers.
Well, the problem with it wasn't there for a while that they talked about the fact that there were like 400 unsecured positions in the police department, and the mayor eliminated those job openings? Wasn't that the deal as well, too?
Yeah, I think that was part of the debate. And those numbers get bounced around. And for me, at least, it's hard to figure out what the open job openings are and what the ones where police officers have retired and those jobs won't be filled. And then there's whatever outgoing Mayor Tashara Jones says is the truth about the numbers. But as I read this, the state is essentially forcing the city to hire more police officers. And I also think, again, if you're Kehoe, you have a certain amount of political capital and goodwill coming into this, and you're using it, the first thing you're really leaning on people for is to make the hiring of more police officers happen. So I think it's going to happen.
It's interesting. Remember, we had that, it's been a while back. John will say, well, that happened on January 22nd of 2024, the way John's mind works. But remember, I talked about the fact that Jane Duker was on Mark Reardon's show, and she ran down the numbers. She says, okay, there are right now I'm just throwing out numbers, but this was relative. She says there are like 1,000 police officers employed by the city of St. Louis, and she went through the whole thing about there's 100 of them who are on injured reserve list, whatever they call it, where they've been injured in the line of duty and they're on a paid leave or something like that. And I think the bottom line number was, she says there's 500 police on the street, and you go like, hold on a minute now, let's think about that for a minute. You start doing the math. You think 500 police, which if they're working double shifts, that'd be 12 hours a day. Drop that down in half. So there's 250 officers on duty at any point in time. And then you figure, okay, so they're working, they're not working 7 days a week. And it comes down to at some point in time, there's like 10 guys on duty in the entire city of St. Louis. Isn't that sort of spooky?
Yeah. And I don't know how anybody who cares about the city, and I'm not one of them, by the way, but I don't know how anybody who cares about the city would think that you could have law and order when the criminals know there's nobody that's going to follow up on any crime reports.
I don't understand that. And the interesting part of this is you compare St. Charles County, and we're talking apples and oranges, but you compare St. Charles County to St. Louis City, and the criminals know. Matter of fact, I was told another story, which I can't attribute to, but the fact that there was a drug bust, a secret. Did I ever tell you this story about the drug bust? One of the police officers told me the story on St. Charles County. Did I ever tell you this one?
No, that's surprising. I don't think you have.
They were trying to do an undercover drug bust in St. Charles County, and they had the undercover officers working this, and the guys who were supposedly going to sell them the dope the one guy was very reticent. He was like, I don't know, and he was trying to back out of it. And finally, they went ahead and did the deal, and they arrested the two guys, the undercover guys, say, hey, pull out their badges, and hey, you're under arrest. And the one guy said to the other guy, I told you we shouldn't be doing this in St. Charles County. They're tough out here.
Yeah, of course. Well, but also if you're in the city of St. Louis and you're a detective, you have you're not going to go after somebody selling a few dime bags, first of all, of marijuana because of the environment today, but also you just don't. You're focused on homicide. You're not focused on folks bringing fentanyl in. It's just you can get away with a lot more, I presume, in the city.
Okay, on to the vaulted number one.
The number one.
Missouri's junior senator, Eric Schmitt, was on Fox News yesterday on the Ingram Angle. The headline from Fox News: Dems are trying to, quote, overblow, unquote, signal leak mistake. Signal leak mistake, creating a, quote, faux controversy, says GOP senator, referring to Eric Schmitt. Eric Schmitt was talking about the fact that it appears as though this whole Hegseth thing was a mistake. The conversation shouldn't have taken place on Signal. Schmitt also points out that Signal was approved by the Biden administration for these type of conversations. And in fact, maybe I should be more clear. Schmitt didn't say that having the conversation on Signal about a policy discussion was a mistake, but the idea that someone from The Atlantic was included in the discussion was certainly a mistake. Now, Schmitt had the best quote from this, which was, quote, I answered more questions in the Capitol today about this than President Autopen not being able to put two sentences together for 4 years, and he was our commander-in-chief. Schmitt points out that Democrats, with this Hegseth mistake, now have something to glom onto. They have something to complain about. They want a scalp, Schmitt says. They weren't able to bring Hegseth down during the confirmation process. All of their attacks against Hegseth failed. So now they have something that they hope they can pick up and wave around and get Trump to fire somebody. But I don't think that's going to happen, Brad.
This thing has just gotten a little bit out of control. And by the way, I meant to say vaunted and not vaulted. This is to me, it's sort of like a big deal about nothing. I mean, yeah, it is sort of, but I guess the thing for me is, by the way, there's an interesting aspect of it. Did you know that the lady who was being grilled, the NPR lady, that was being grilled yesterday at the congressional hearings, do you know she's on the board of Signal? Did you know this story?
I did not know that.
Yes,
wow.
That came out yesterday that she's, or at least she used to be, maybe she's not anymore, but she was on the board. There's an advisory board or something like that. the thing is sort of bizarre. I mean, first off, I'm thinking to myself, why would they be doing this? See, John, this is a reason for, and you and I go back and forth in this. This is a reason for people physically being present in a room when this is going on. If this was going to happen, they should have drawn everybody together, put them in a skiff. And you know what if you don't know what a skiff is, it stands for something, but essentially it's like a room where you can't bring your phone in, and it's like AMI protected, so there's no.
Yeah, we got it. So you're saying get them all in the same place when you have text communication. There's mistakes that are going to be made, and you're going to have things like that.
Sit them down and say, okay, here we go. What do they call it, the situation room or something like that?
Yeah.
And, because the problem with this is that even though they put this guy's name in by mistake, the Chinese got all our stuff hacked anyway. I mean, they're,
That's true. I just don't know. So back to reality, you're not going to get people in the same room at the same time. You're not going to get a dozen people spread throughout Virginia, Maryland, D.C. all together on a moment's notice at the same place at the same time. So that's not realistic. But in the real world, there's probably a way that you can follow some sort of protocol. Ann Wagner discussed this yesterday or 2 days ago on Annie Fry's show. There's probably something you can do in the intelligence community in terms of best practices that's realistic that involves some sort of encrypted conversation.
Put them on Nextdoor.
Yeah, you know what? And then that way they could have a bunch of geriatrics weigh in on dogs relieving themselves in front yards.
Right.
Did anybody see that smoke off of 141? Yes. Did you hear that boom? I caught a deer on my Ring camera. Does anybody want to see it? No. I'm busy reading J.C. Corcoran's autobiography.
By the way,
I don't have time to watch a deer Ring cam.
When I put my Ring camera up, there's a stupid app that I can't quite get rid of. I get the stupid notifications all the time, and some of them are just so funny. Some of them are like comic relief, although the people that send them out don't mean them to be comic relief. But my favorite one was, I found a turtle in my backyard. Did anybody lose their turtle?
Oh, good grief.
Oh, yes, that's my pet. I lost him. Okay. So Ann Wagner, what did she say again? I missed that. I had to do something here in the studio.
Yeah, she was on Annie Fry 2 days ago talking about how she hopes the intelligence community will get together and come up with best practice protocols. Because in other words, if Signal isn't good enough, or if something like this can happen on Signal, apparently based on human error, I'm paraphrasing here, then we got to figure that out.
Yeah.
And in my mind, like, how do you – when I would build communications protocols, I would build in idiot proofing. So if you have an admin who, I don't know, God forbid is in her 60s and futzing around on a computer, and you give her an assignment and she adds incorrect people to a distribution list about, I don't know, company layoffs that are coming. If you give an old person a computer and you expect them to handle a distribution list, how can you make sure that you idiot proof it so that woman in her 60s doesn't send confidential information to people in the company that don't need it? You see what I'm saying, Brad?
Yeah, but you don't have to worry about guys in their 80s because they never make mistakes, right?
That's true. You're exactly right, Brad.
John, I'm going to grab this little thing they call a mouse. I think it's called a mouse.
Just terrible. And if you can't idiot proof a process, then you need to just stop giving responsibility to people who can't, who don't double check their stuff. Brad, could you imagine people posting stuff to the internet without reading it back twice and just throwing stuff up and saying, John will fix it?
John, you're always so kind to me. Okay, we have to take a break. B Block is up next.